Welcome back, my friends, to AA Recovery Interviews. I'm your host, Howard L., and I'm an alcoholic. Sober since January 1st, 1988, one day at a time. I'm grateful you've joined us. AA Recovery Interviews is the podcast where Alcoholics Anonymous members from around the world share their extraordinary stories of experience, strength, and hope. If you've enjoyed the more than 125 interviews in this podcast series so far, will you do a little service work by spreading the word about this rich and meaningful listening experience? This show is another helping hand of AA we can all extend to alcoholics everywhere. On today's show, my guest, Doug W., shares his story that begins with a childhood during which he enjoyed all the opportunities to succeed in life. Unfortunately, a learning disability, combined with a short stature, made for an academic struggle in school and a struggle with bullies after school. Feeling left out and disregarded by his peers, Doug found alcohol in his early teens, and a new way to cope with life opened up. Hanging with like-minded friends in high school and college, Doug's drinking escalated, as did the negative consequences of his increasingly frequent binges. In the midst of his functional alcoholism, he managed to sustain marriage and career into his late 20s when the wheels started to come off. Faced with the inevitable misery and pain that accompanies every alcoholic's demise, life got bad enough that, by age 28, Doug finally put down the drink and came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've had the opportunity to attend many meetings with Doug during his 12 years of sobriety and can personally attest to the hard work and commitment he has invested in the program. From regular attendance at meetings to a wide variety of service work to continuous commitment to his family and friends, Doug has clearly demonstrated a program in action. Listeners will surely identify with many parts of his story and glean valuable insights into living a sober life with purpose and integrity. So, please enjoy the next hour and 5 minutes with my friend and AA brother, Doug W.
Hi, I'm Doug. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Doug. Welcome to AA Recovery Interviews podcast. You and I had the opportunity to attend a really great men's meeting today. I've done a number of these interviews after that meeting, and what's great is it gets guys really prepped for talking from the heart, and I really appreciate the fact that you're with me today to be a part of this experience.
Thank you, Howard. It's good to be here with you.
You and I have known each other a pretty long time, I'd say. I met you when you first came in, and how many years ago was that now?
It'll be 12 years in 2 weeks.
Well, so your sobriety date is?
August 10th of 2011. My first meeting was a Wednesday night. It was pretty close to my house. I figured I wouldn't know anybody there. It seemed very anonymous. I like that. And then I probably came to Holy Name on Sunday night, within that first week or two. And
that's probably where I met you. That's right. So most people don't just show up at a meeting without a good reason. What was there going on right before your very first meeting that made you think, I probably ought to go to an AA meeting? What was going on in your life at that point?
I think a few things. I had just finished a graduate school program, and I was working during the week and doing graduate school on the weekends. It was very stressful. My father had kind of called in a favor to help get me into this program. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get in on my own. So I kind of felt like, I was just barely skating by in this program. And it was real stressful. And I would say during those 2 years, my drinking went from what I thought was, hey, I'm a college kid, I'm partying, and I'm, one of the fun guys, to where I really felt like I'm drinking like an alcoholic, right? This is a problem, right? I didn't see, grown professional men acting like this. I didn't see people who held jobs and stayed out of jail and things. I didn't see them, drinking this way, this kind of relationship with alcohol. And I thought it'd get better when I stopped this MBA program, and instead it just continued accelerating. So there was no control.
You mentioned what you said you saw as men were not acting like you were acting at that point. Let me ask you something, even going back, let's say, even to your childhood. When you think back to being a kid, if somebody had asked you as say, an 8 or 10-year-old kid what an alcoholic was, what would you have said?
Well, I would say that, it was what my parents used to refer to as bums, which would be the guys that hung out outside the convenience store, typically next to some sort of, kind of an overpass. They lived out of shopping carts, and they always had a bottle, and they weren't really productive, and you couldn't trust them, you couldn't depend on them, and it was pretty easy to spot them.
So, as was the case with my understanding, and even though there was addiction in my family, it still seemed like the alcoholism and alcoholics were out there somewhere. Like you, if someone asked me the same question as a kid, I would have probably said the exact same thing. The bum under the bridge drinking out of a paper bag. And unfortunately, when I was growing up, most of the popular media at the time, that's how alcoholics were portrayed. It was very seldom that you'd see somebody portrayed correctly all the time. Yeah, so would that suggest that you didn't have alcoholism in your family, or what's your understanding of alcohol when it looks at your extended family or your family of origin going back a few generations?
So growing up, I did not see anybody really that I thought of as an alcoholic. My parents didn't seem to be alcoholic. Aunts, uncles, if that was there in the family, it was avoided, it was kind of minimized. It really was not a part of my growing up at all. That I was aware of at that point in time.
Did you ever see or encounter certain behavior that you couldn't explain that might have been alcoholism, but because you were a kid or because your parents weren't talking about it, that actually was going on that you just didn't know about it?
At the time, not particularly. As time has gone on, and as I became an adult, and as the kids left the house, I started to notice that maybe the relationship with alcohol in my home wasn't what it was, for a lot of people even really. It seemed like, hey, where did this come from? And that was really a surprise. And it was not, like I said, not until I got into, past 18 into college and would come home, and I would just, I started to see in my immediate family there, somebody stumbling, somebody slurring. And a lot of the externals, were still maintained. I was really fortunate in the way that I was brought up. I was given tons of opportunities, and, my parents worked so hard to show me love and keep us safe. But yeah, as time went on, I did notice that there was kind of a relationship with alcohol, and not just in one person, in the people that interacted with that person too. And that surprised me as I grew up, yeah.
Yeah, it would be surprising if you hadn't seen it, especially till your later teenage years. Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have an older half-brother and half-sister, and then I have a younger sister and then a younger brother.
So there were 5 of you?
There were 5, yeah.
And how close in age were y'all?
My older brother is 11 years older. My older sister is, I want to say, maybe 8 or 9 years older.
Okay.
Yeah, and then my younger sister is about 3 or 4 years younger, and then my younger brother is probably 5 or 6 years younger.
I see. My older brother was like 8 or 9 years older than me, so I didn't really know him as a kid, And by the time I was old enough to be able to interact with him, he was almost out of the house, and didn't want anything to do with a little baby brother. What kind of relationship did you have with your older siblings or half-siblings versus your younger siblings?
My father got married, had a son and a daughter, got divorced, married my mom. She was younger, and then I was the first of their children that they had together.
I see.
So my older brother he didn't really ever live with us, it felt like. He lived with his mother. He would come visit on the weekends, but they were like in the woodlands, and so it was, they didn't just pop in for things. And so, and then he left high school early to go pursue his music passion, his music career. So, really limited as a child type of interaction with him. My older sister, she came down from the woodlands during high school and went to school with us and lived with us in Houston.
Oh, okay. So you knew her much more like a traditional considerably older sibling than your half-brother.
Yeah, she was involved. She would take us to do things, and we would see her, and we'd have dinners with her. And so I would say a lot more exposure to her and a lot better, opportunity to build a better relationship.
Yeah. Are you still close to this day?
Yeah, we're still close. Yeah, I mean, she lives in a different part of Texas, And she's got a career and she's got kids and, so we both stay pretty busy, but we try to do things together kind of as schedules allow.
So your younger siblings, your younger brother and your younger sister, what was your relationship like with them growing up?
So my mom had me, and so then, I was born in 1983, and then my sister was born in 86, and then my brother was born in 87. So it felt kind of like it was me and then the two babies, right? That's kind of what we called them, the babies. So I felt a little bit more of, kind of an island there in between the older kids and then not part of one of the babies, but still, kind of sharing attention with the other siblings too, right?
Well, you said something earlier, Doug, about really having a pretty wonderful experience with your parents and them showing you a lot of love. I can imagine what you must think from time to time when you hear all the war stories and all the horror stories of people talking about their childhoods. And I've interviewed people for the podcast who have talked about having wonderful childhoods and everything else. And when I first started hearing that, when I came into the program and throughout my sobriety, there was almost this feeling because of what a miserable childhood I had and listening to other people's miserable, horrible stories about their childhoods, that whenever I'd hear somebody saying, my parents loved me and they treated us with respect and they were great folks and everything else, there's a part of me that wants to say, that can't be true. What's it like for you sitting in meetings and over the years hearing about how crummy things were for other people, knowing how good they were for you?
I was given everything that, kind of from a material perspective, I was given an opportunity to go to a great private school. I grew up in a great neighborhood. My mother stayed home and cared for the kids. She had a housekeeper to come help, and so if she needed to do something, she could leave us with someone safe. So there was a lot that I was given, and it was still difficult for me. And I think that, probably most of that has to do with kind of what I like to think of as a spiritual malady, kind of a need for God, a need for a spiritual connection that just wasn't developed.
When did you first feel that?
I would say I kind of felt restless, irritable, and discontent. I mean, from my earliest memories. And so, where some people would have said, hey, look at all these opportunities, and then there would be one or two things that maybe they didn't like or where they didn't excel or where they had some troubles, and they were kind of resilient enough to get past those. I think the way that I'm particularly built, it was still really difficult for me, just that process of growing up and not having, kind of what I get from AA now, which is a way to go clear my conscience of the things that I've done that, that my heart really doesn't like, when I do those things, and an ability to go and follow a script and go clean up and repair damage with God's kids when I've hurt one, because that hurts my heart too. And I didn't know about that. I mean, growing up, your parents say, hey, go say sorry if you hurt somebody, but I don't know. It didn't feel as effective for me as, like what we do in AA and really what I think I needed all along.
Yeah.
So it was difficult. And, you combine that with I had a learning disability, had ADD. And so school was a little bit harder in terms of being able to process things in the classroom. And I was a small kid. I had a little bit later birthday. I had a March birthday. And you combine that with the fact that our family tends to just be a little bit smaller in frame. And, so there was things that, that were a little more difficult than some kids might have had or than maybe some of my siblings might have had.
Yeah. Did you get picked on a lot when you were a kid?
I did get picked on. Yeah. I got picked on. Yeah.
Yeah, I did too when I was a kid. And that's because I was fat. I was a fat little kid and also short. And the problem was for me always that I could never get a fair hearing about that from the people I most needed it from. And I'm talking about my parents. Every now and then an uncle or aunt might talk to me about it, but there was never anybody to listen with any kind of empathy about that. What was your experience when you were struggling not only with the spiritual desire and the other things that were happening to you? What kind of opportunity did you have to share that with the people who might be able to help you, and what was their response?
My father was really successful in business, and he loved it. He was really good at it, and he had a lot of great relationships in business, and was served as a great business mentor for me and a lot of people. But what I have found is that a lot of times being in the boardroom and demonstrating confidence, not showing weakness, not being vulnerable, looking intelligent, being witty, being a presence in a room, that a lot of those things really, to me, I feel separated when I have those behaviors. And I think that those were real helpful for my dad in, success in the business world. And that was kind of the way he was wired, and I guess the way he was brought up too. But, in AA, we really do a lot of the opposite, right? We're taught to tell on ourselves. We're taught to be humble. We had the whole meeting today about humility and about admitting when we're wrong and admitting we don't know it all. And, I think there was an air at home, and I guess it feels like this is pretty widespread, but for somebody like me, I needed way more. I needed a way different approach to things and a different system. And so I don't feel like I had the outlet that I would have liked in terms of, having that level of kind of a safe space to be vulnerable, to be intimate, and to really let my guard down. Instead, it was really all about, look, this is the type of man we are in this family, and you tough it out. Those things don't matter. What matters is our standing in the community, our business success, our status, how we look, and our intelligence. And if you got picked last in dodgeball, you just move on, right? That doesn't matter. Or if you didn't get a good enough grade, is there something we need to change? It's just work harder. And so that made it to where, one, I had a great need, and then two, I don't think my parents had grown up in that mindset, that we kind of have to have in AA, or that I see a lot of in AA, of tolerance, acceptance, understanding the problem, and accepting everything just as it is, as opposed to really pushing for an ideal certain outcome.
Yeah, I get that. And what you're describing, Doug, is what I've seen a lot over the years in both men I've sponsored and other people I've known in the program. When they had a parent who is particularly successful either in business or in some other endeavor, who takes that same paradigm of success and management back home, and that's how they manage their home and their children, there's something missing there, because in the business world, you're not going to show unconditional love for your vice president or your competitor, but in a home where you've got a parent, that's really what you're striving for. When you're operating like that in a business environment all day, and you bring that same framework for dealing with your family, then as a kid, you're not getting anything what you need. Sounds similar.
Yes. My parents did. My mother was raised by a World War II vet who saw combat in Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge, and so that's again gonna teach you to compartmentalize some things that are painful or difficult, and just really focus on outcome. He was a pretty successful businessman as well, and so I think there was just this focus on excellence, and I think some people would thrive in that environment, but me, as an alcoholic with this, one with a learning disability and kind of being small, and then I've got kind of this, what I now know is untreated alcoholism. It was really difficult. I felt alone, and I felt I had trouble connecting, and I felt like I didn't know exactly what was wrong with me, but I did feel less than. And I felt that then, but I didn't know, necessarily how to express that. My parents tried to take me to psychologists and things, and some of it was I wasn't ready to go use some of these tools that they tried to give me. They might have been able to listen to me come home and really kind of, like we do in AA, inventory. Hey, here's what happened. I was selfish and scared, and here's what my needs are, and here's how I feel like I can't take care of myself. So had I been able to do that, had I been mature enough, I would have guessed, would have responded, in a loving, compassionate way. But I wasn't there. They didn't know they needed to do that. And so the result was what should have been a good childhood really felt kind of crummy.
And what you're describing is a situation where if the needs are to be expressed, the presumption is that the kid is going to do it and not the adult. But the kid, in my case, I could never figure out what to ask or what to say or put into words how I was really feeling. And so often when I would go to my parents with any kind of problem or whatever, they'd say, their response to it wasn't loving, well, tell me about it, let's decompress, let's debrief here. It would be, grow up, knock it off, just buck up, forget about today. And some of that may have been okay, but when I look at the impact it had on me as a child, and then later on in life, how that same schema got injected into other parts of my life. So when you were a kid, how did you cope with that from the time you were old enough to understand that it was bothering you until, let's say, you were able to get to alcohol to deal with it?
Yeah, I think I needed alcohol all along. I didn't have that available. I didn't know that would fix it. I would say the first way that I was able to kind of, control things in my reality a little bit was to kind of acting out behavior, right? You're picking a fight with your siblings, playing with fire, you're picking fights with your babysitter, disturbing class. So anything that I could do to kind of create intensity, that was the first kind of method I had to, kind of take some of this pain away that I had that I wasn't really able to get much in the way of relief from.
So the pain was about the lack of what it was that you needed at that time, as opposed to pain being put on you by your environment or your home life.
I think some of the pain was, and my father was a successful banker, but he also was really reaching for the next social rung, right? And both this was important to both my parents, and it's pretty normal in America. But I think you combine that with, so me being in this kind of fancy private school where these people have their parents are buildings in the med center are named after the and this kind of thing, and there's academic excellence, right? And there's athletic excellence, and I come in there kind of short and kind of skinny and learning disability and young for my grade, and it was pretty miserable for me. So I think there was the pain of the environment, right? And then I think on top of that, I didn't necessarily have a set of tools that could effectively deal with all that. I kind of just felt stuck.
Yeah, I get that. And the thing is, when you're a kid and you're facing the kind of situations that you're talking about, there's a bag of tools that we find out about much later. Like I found out about the bag of tools once I got to AA and they told me about a bag of tools. But can you imagine having been a kid and knowing that there was a bag of tools out there somewhere? If I had known that, I might have asked my parents for that bag of tools because I felt exactly like you. So when you were going to the private school and everything, when did you first take your very first drink?
The first drink that I remember taking was, my parents were not beer drinkers, but there were 2 Coors Lights in the back of the fridge, right? I'm guessing I was 7, 8 years old. And I grabbed it, I peeled the tab off, I took one sip, I don't remember liking it particularly, and then I put it back open. I kind of freaked out. And of course, they came the next day and said something to me, and I don't know what I said, but I kind of got in trouble, and I didn't even get the benefit of the buzz. But I sure did catch some trouble over it.
Yeah, a lot of us have that first sip way earlier than the sip taken by our own accord with the knowledge of what we're doing. At what age did you finally take a drink on your own volition?
I would say turning 14 years old.
Yeah.
Sometime that year, at the liquor cabinet when my parents weren't there, filling up like a Scope bottle or something like that, and then running up to my room, with one of my friends, and kind of, maybe in anticipation of prom or something like that. It feels like that was kind of when I started doing this. To me, it kind of felt like it was the behavior where, I'm kind of doing something I'm not supposed to, and that's exciting. So this kind of acting out for negative attention. Mm-hmm. And so I remember kind of getting a charge, in that way. And then the first time that I actually kind of felt drunk, I think I was at a friend's house, and we had gotten some guy that, kind of homeless guy outside of a convenience store to buy us like a 12-pack or something. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I actually kind of did real drinking at that point. It kind of felt like, okay, well, so this is how you do it. And I remember, thinking this is a good thing, right? This is positive, and I need more of this, and this is kind of what the cool guys at school are doing. I started to feel cool about this time, right? Because I was hey guys, let's go get some cigarettes and a dip, and, we're going to, get some alcohol somehow. I kind of started to feel like I had arrived, like it describes in the book, in this time. And it was, marijuana was involved too. I didn't realize it exactly. My friends kind of tricked me the first time I ever smoked weed. They said it was a cigarette because I was afraid. But it was all in that same kind of, 6 to 12 months entering high school where, kind of all these, these vices really started to become a regular part of my life. I'd been missing it my whole life, right? I'd been missing the companionship, the camaraderie, this feeling of like I'm kind of legitimate. And I've found something to treat on a more consistent basis to treat this really crummy feeling I had inside.
And you found a group of people who would be your running buddies. That must have felt pretty good, being included.
It felt really good, right? These were the guys that, I had trouble hanging out with, when I was in third grade, fourth grade. But these kind of guys, they were just cooler.
Yeah.
They were cooler. And this is what they were into. And this is what I was into. It worked, right?
So this is as you were going into high school.
Going into high school, yeah.
So how did that behavior play out during high school for you? Did you hang with that particular group? And how did it affect your scholastics as well?
My grades weren't that great. Grades never really were that great. And so I always, got by, but I wasn't like excelling in school, right?
Well, you had the learning disability to kind of lay that off on, didn't you?
I had learning disability. My parents were really good, right? They did what they could. They got me tested. They got me extra time. They got me Ritalin. They threw what they could at the problem. I didn't get held back. Some of the teachers suggested, you should be held back. I didn't get held back. I don't know if that would have helped or not. But anyway, so for the most part, I just kind of had to grind it out and do what I could and take advantage of things like the extra time or things like, kind of getting to school early and I cheated a lot too. Cheating or, kind of getting help from a friend. And thankfully I was still in, kind of small private schools. And so if I had the willingness, the inclination, I had plenty of access to teachers to go say, hey, I didn't understand that. Or I was too nervous to ask a question about that in class. Please explain. I was given a lot of opportunities to deal with these things. And some of the time I took advantage of it, but I wasn't a great student.
And you were hanging with a particular group of guys?
Yeah, I was hanging with the guys that were, on the football team, a lot of them, and they kind of had cool cars, and some of them had pretty girlfriends. This kind of need that I had and that I had seen my parents do, kind of pursuing excellence, in some of the financial material, kind of status, some of these kind of things. And my parents were really good at it, I think. I kind of felt like I did a better job of that in high school because, I was kind of hanging out with those guys at that point, and they wanted to hang out with me, right? We'd get together. Hey, Doug, you want to go have a dip in the bathroom? Let's cut class. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. You want to hang out with me? Of course. And I loved it, right? And so I was connecting, I felt kind of special, and I was included. And I had trouble being included and kind of letting myself even really connect in those earlier grades just because I didn't have a solution for the alcoholism. And so these people were trying to be my friend, and we really, it was really hard for me to just even feel okay enough in my skin to do much with any one person for any amount of time. I would say the use of alcohol made it easier.
Looking back at the 4 years in high school, did you ever have any negative consequences or get caught or anything else like that happen to you?
Yes, I did. I would say I kind of built my life around kind of alcohol and being able to go smoke cigarettes. And I kind of had a little bit of a marijuana phase in high school too. One of my friends had a big party because his parents were divorced. Mom went out of town. So we had a big blowout, right? And then sure enough, I was the drunkest guy there, right? Something happened. A girl got hurt somehow. And I was the one that everybody said was the drunk one because I was the one throwing up. I get called into the principal, and they kind of said, hey, we've heard, this, and, you better just admit it. And so I said, yeah, I was. So I got suspended. So that was the first, that was like 10th grade. And so that was, one of the first big, kind of consequences I had from alcohol. And what I had decided was, I'm not going to give up alcohol. And so I'll just give up these friends at this private school where we've got this, Christian principal, and he's all over us. So I'm going to go hang out with friends from high school, smoke cigarettes, I can drink all I want, and I'll have my freedom and and everything will be fine. All I got to do is just survive 2 more years, get to college, and I'm good. So,
And it sounds like a pretty interesting wave to ride into college after high school. You got into trouble for something that you weren't even involved in, but alcohol was still seemed to be the focus because you were the sickest there at the deal. I mean, so what was college like for you?
college was great too. I went to a little bitty private school, a little Methodist school in Mississippi. I was kind of this kid from the big city, and I had a cool fake ID. It was better than the fake IDs in Jackson, Mississippi, and my grandmother gave us some money at Christmas to float beer, and my dad was his job was going well, so he had a pretty good budget. He had bought me a new car in that first year or so of college. I felt like I'd arrived, right? I kind of felt a little more comfortable with girls and kind of starting to, doing the dating thing. I wasn't very good at it, but I started it. There was all the fraternity parties. I joined a fraternity party. I had fraternities fighting over me, right, as opposed to feeling excluded, and kind of, the earlier school ages. I had people that wanted me, and I kind of had a cool car, and
it's kind of like your reputation preceded you, huh?
Yeah. So it was, college was really pretty amazing.
So the fraternity that you were in, were you daily drinking at that point?
I was not. No, I had real bad acne too. I forgot to mention that. So, although the alcohol helped me kind of forget about that. And so I was on some medication to keep the acne down. And you're not supposed to drink on it. But, three nights a week or whatever, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I would say I'll forget it. And I would drink a lot on those nights. And so, I was kind of...
You were a binge drinker.
Yeah, binge drinker.
So it sounds like you had a pretty wild time in college.
Yeah, I studied business. That felt, understandable for me. I had my dad to call and ask accounting questions too. And I really valued, I placed a lot of importance on grades and business and kind of getting a job and how I looked for internships and things like that. So I was able to work pretty hard for 3 or 4 nights a week, pretty disciplined, not much alcohol during the week, big blowouts on the weekend, big fraternity parties, things like that, long nights out at the bar. And I was kind of pulling it all off. So to me, it felt like I had it handled, and just like I was, one of the normal fraternity kids that, goes through, has a big time, and then goes and can be successful afterwards.
We'll be right back. My friends, if you're enjoying AA recovery interviews, I invite you to check out my latest audiobook, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how more than 100 men have recovered from alcoholism. This is the word-for-word, cover-to-cover reading of the first edition of the Big Book, published in 1939. It's a relaxing yet meaningful and engaging way to listen to the Big Book anytime, any place. Have a free listen at Audible, iTunes, or Amazon. While you're there, search for my other audiobook, Lost Stories of the Big Book, 30 original stories missing from the 3rd and 4th editions of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's also available from Amazon as a Kindle book or in paperback if you'd like to read along. You're going to love it. And we're back. So what were the next number of years like? I mean, we're talking about a period from 22 until... How old were you when you stopped?
I was 28.
6 years between getting out of school and when you stopped drinking. Can you expand on those 6 years and what they were like in terms of the progression of what would become the alcoholism that brought you into AA?
Getting out, I got a job in banking just like my dad had. Started work, and the economy was good, so the bank, we were busy, we were closing deals. I had some success. I brought some new clients in, so I was getting promoted. So things were going really well, right? I'd take clients out drinking. I started an MBA program 2 years after graduating from undergrad. And at that point in time, what was kind of a normal kind of weekend binge behavior really turned into it was like the first class. I remember the class. It was a stats class and a business law class. And they were so hard, I just felt like my head was going to explode from all the pressure and the tension. Mm-hmm. And what I found was, coming home during the week and drinking, right? And I guess I'd stopped the acne medicine or something at that point. And I stopped using tobacco too right about the time. So whereas I had, tobacco to kind of go to for a little something for me during the week, now I've kind of gotten rid of that. The woman I was dating at the time, kind of gave me some grief about that. So I stopped that, but I started drinking more. I started drinking during the week as a result of this MBA program. And part of the reason I was drinking so much at night is the stress. And some of it was I was taking Ritalin to get through a busy day at the bank, and then 4 or 5 hours after 5 p.m. studying at my desk for the weekend's classes. You're all wired up on, caffeine and Ritalin and things like that. And 9:30 comes, you can't just put your head down on the pillow and go to bed. So, I'll take a Lunesta, I'll get a prescription for that. And then I'll drink some, red wine, or I'll drink some vodka, or, screwdriver or whatever. And so it worked, right? It was able to get me to bed. But it was at that point in time where I started to feel like an alcoholic. I was like, this behavior is strange. I didn't see my dad do this. Why am I needing so much of this? Why is this pressure so great? But, I had to get through school and work and get some rest. And so that was what I did.
And you still had things to blame it on outside of the alcohol, didn't you? The Ritalin and the stress and everything else. When did it start being more about the alcohol than the other things?
I would say my heart really was alcohol. And when I finished MBA, there was no real need to go take a bunch of Ritalin, starting at 5 p.m. and study for 4 hours. So I could kind of wind down, right? Go, play ping pong in the garage. I was married at this point in time, got married in 2009. So I kind of got rid of the sleeping pills and the Ritalin and stuff like that. And I figured with the stress from MBA, being gone, and just kind of regular working a day job, it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe I wouldn't drink like a maniac. But that was not the case. I still drank like a maniac, and it kept progressing despite the fact that all the stress was gone.
Did you do most of your drinking at home?
It was a little bit of a mix. I would say probably the majority of it was at home. But I mean, being in kind of the business development sales field, we'd go take clients out, take them out for a dinner, and there'd be lots of alcohol, or hey, I'm going to go to the country club, or I'm going to go to the social club downtown. I'm going to have some drinks. I'm going to kind of network. And then I'm going to go home and, hey, this is a good thing. I should be doing this. I should be networking, right? This is building the business.
Were you encountering resistance from your wife to your drinking, or was she drinking with you? What was that relationship like?
She would complain when I would do something stupid. There was one time where we had gone to dinner at my aunt's house, and they were big wine connoisseurs. They had this fancy red wine from Napa Valley. And I drank a ton of it and hadn't eaten much. And then I fell asleep in the car on the way home, and she shoved me. I was in the passenger seat. She shoved my shoulder to wake me up. And I woke up, but when I did, my head tipped back, and it kind of created like this, gag kind of reflex in my throat. And I threw up all over the front of her car and down her air vents.
Oh, no. God.
So, this is like I've got work the next day kind of thing, right? So, was she on me to go to AA? No. But she sure complained when, I would, do something that caused her some grief.
So she saw that there was a problem brewing, and did it just get worse over the years? Was there a progression?
Yeah, I would say there was a progression. There was just, it was like once alcohol had me, kind of starting around that, age 24, 25, it just the grip never let up. And so, I would try so hard. I'd have some shameful event like, falling asleep, at the networking club where I'm supposed to be there and, impressing people and meeting prospective clients. And the bartender would come wake me up after an hour or two, like, sir, you sign your check and get out of here. And so I would have these kind of shameful events and try to stop and go, this is not how we behave. I didn't see this growing up. But I just couldn't. It just, I could go 3 or 4 days, right? I could try to count drinks. I could try to, put them in an app and, not exceed calories. And I tried, lots of different, alternate sparkling waters, with alcoholic drinks. And no matter what I did, it was just like, my body demanded a certain amount of alcohol per week. And if I didn't give it to it, the spring was just, in the Jack in the Box was just compressed all the way by Thursday night or Friday night. And then, it would just explode open, and that caused trouble at home and caused some kind of embarrassing consequences, in a professional setting or a social setting or.
Sounds like it was getting worse and worse.
It was absolutely progressing.
So you're coming up on the point at which you get into AA.
Yeah, so I was 27. I couldn't get a handle on my drinking no matter what I tried. And I tried everything I could. Now, when I had quit smoking cigarettes, I had gone to the doctor and he'd given me a pill, right? They had Chantix or something. Right. So I took that. I said, "Look, doc, I got pretty good willpower. Just give me something to get past these first couple of weeks." And so when I was 27, I went back to the same doctor and I said the same thing. I said, "Hey, doc, alcohol is just, I can't get a hold of it. Can you give me like a pill or something just to get me through 10 days? I think that's going to be the tough part. That's how it was with smoking." And he said, "Ha, ha, ha." And then he said, stay here. And he went to his office and came back with a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and a meeting schedule. And he says, "In 25 years practicing medicine, this is the only thing I've ever seen work for that." And he slid it over to me and sent me on my way.
That is a rare story where a doctor has interceded. Did you ever find out about him? Did it turn out that he was in the program or anything like that? Did you ever see him later on?
I talked to him about it. I went to him for a number of years afterwards and, thanked him for saving my life. And I even brought some big books back to him so that he could continue handing those out, paying it forward. And one of the guys I met in the program said that he got one of those books from that doctor. He may have had some experience with friends or family or something. I don't remember the specifics.
Yeah, but you wanted pills. He gave you a book. How did that go over?
Not well.
Yeah?
I was mad. And so the book sat on the shelf for 6 months as I continued to try to control my drinking and not have to go to these meetings.
Did you ever crack it open? Did you ever take a look at the schedule of meetings and think, maybe I ought to do this? Or did the books just sit there?
Yeah, the book sat there. There was some, those things were kryptonite for a solid 6 months. And then, eventually it's kind of like, man, I just, I'd had a kind of an embarrassing month or two at the end. And I kind of knew it was time, but I'd kind of been putting it off. And I was actually, so my mom's side of the family, they've got a ranch. So we were all out there, me and my little brother and my sister. I don't know if my sister was out there, and my mom and dad. And my little brother, by the way, at this point in time, had graduated college, but we didn't realize it at the time. But he had paranoid schizophrenia. And so he would go seclude himself at one of the houses at the ranch and kind of stay away from us. He was kind of hearing voices and all this kind of stuff. And we didn't get any of that. I just thought he was, kind of being lazy, not getting a job. And anyway, so he's, we're kind of invading his safe space. And, he had drank some of my wine that night, and I was kind of mad that I didn't have it all. And so we were going back and forth a little bit, but kind of keeping our distance. He came out and shot a BB gun at me. And I had a little pistol in my pocket, a little .32, and I kind of pulled it out and fired a warning shot into the ground. I was like, "Oh yeah, don't bring a BB gun to a gunfight." And then he went and got a 20 gauge and fired that up into the air, and then I kind of dashed across the yard and got a bigger pistol out of my car, and I had my Glock, and I'm doing combat rolls across the front yard. And my mom's freaking out, by the way, at this point in time. And so she's called the county sheriff or whatever who's on the way. And she kind of tried to take the gun away from me.
And this is you drunk.
Yeah.
And your brother in his schizophrenia and paranoia.
Yeah.
And behavior.
Yeah. So he had some alcohol that night. And, the poor guy's got voices and, all this kind of stuff that he's dealing with. And so anyway, and I was really, really drunk at that point. And, what should have been a kind of a safe place to go get drunk, right out in the country in the middle of nowhere, I kind of managed to mess it up. And so the police come and I kind of, "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. I'll stay in bed." And, they left. So I didn't really get caught when I should have, like a number of other times, drinking and driving, these different kind of things. But it was those kind of events where I was just like, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna kill somebody. I'm gonna hit somebody, coming home, from some drinking event out, even if it's a legitimate thing, right? Say I took a client out or whatever.
Did you have DUIs or DWIs along the way?
Never got a DUI.
So this reckoning kind of happens to you at this point, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. What did the final day or two look like prior to you picking up that book and that schedule?
I think it finally came down to where it was like, there's no way. Like, I'm going to lose. I worked really hard to get this job. I got this MBA. Did this training program at work, and like, I've got a lot to lose here. I don't think I'm smart enough with this, learning disability, and my limited offering in terms of skill set, personality, and, intellect, everything, to get another job. And like, I cannot screw this up. And I've got this beautiful woman that's married me, and, I'm going to lose her too. And, I hadn't really been able to get along with any other, women. And so I'm going to blow that. And, I'm just, going to run my life, and I might die on the way or kill someone. And I just, for whatever reason, I had seen how it was going in my life, how quickly I had progressed. And I had started to see in my immediate family, some of the behavior where as the person had aged and gotten into their 50s, they're drinking a lot. And they were stumbling, and they were slurring, and they were falling down, and they were having to go get stitches. And I was starting to see this stuff, and I said, well, wait a minute, if I'm related, to them, and I'm worse off, I've got a worse case, or I'm not pulling it off as well, or something, I'm toast. I have to go. I have to stop. I lose it all, instantly, or imminently rather. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think that was kind of higher power coming down, kind of tapping me on the shoulder, saying, hey, look, I've got something different for you, and I don't know what all went into the formula of me being ready without a DUI, without losing the pretty wife, and without losing the job. And I had some kind of close calls at work, but, I was pulling it off.
Yeah.
And so I feel really lucky in that I was able to go get into AA just because I needed it. I feel like so many people need this program and have a lot more pain and a lot more external consequences than I did. But I came in, I listened to the shares in the meeting. I said, yep, this is me. And the only way these people were able to quit drinking for good is by continuing to go to this program and continuing to work these steps. And I better do what they say, or I'm going to die. I'm 28, and all these rock stars die at 28. Jim Morrison, and all these people, Hendrix. You just go on down the list, and I was like, that's going to be me. I got a bad case of it, so I better get in and do what they say.
So you make it to AA. When you very first walked in the door, maybe even your first few meetings or first few weeks, what kind of expectations did you have about what AA would be like? And did those turn out to be pretty valid or completely incorrect? What were you feeling like when you went to AA for the first number of meetings or weeks?
I didn't know what to expect with AA. I had seen, one or two movies where they're in some sort of, recovery type meeting. And so I had a general idea. I just really didn't know. I didn't know if I was alcoholic, like in the same way that you people were. So I think that was part of it. I was terrified of seeing someone I know. And I think on some level it was like, well, if I go admit this problem, and then I can't do it or I can't get it, I'm terrified that I admitted that I had this and then I didn't then go solve the problem. And so I was kind of, I think I was trying to keep my guard up a little bit, but I mean, pretty quickly, like the first meeting or two, that it was like, man, this is where I belong. And, and maybe I'm not an alcoholic like these people because I didn't have a DUI and I hadn't lost my job and I wasn't broke. So part of me kind of said, well, maybe I'm not exactly like them. Like my case of alcoholism isn't as bad as theirs. Yeah. But I also had the truth that I knew and that I felt, which was I cannot drink anymore. I have to quit drinking. And so whatever I am, if there's something that keeps me off alcohol, on an ongoing basis, that's what I need to do.
When I was new, I couldn't quite understand what it was about the program that was going to keep me from wanting to drink. I mean, I walked in, I saw the steps on the wall, I saw the traditions, I saw all these people sitting there who seemed to be having a good time, seemed like everybody knew everybody, and everybody was having a good time in there except me. But I wasn't quite sure what it was about the program that was going to help me stay sober. It just seemed, nobody sat me down, and this was unfortunate at my first several meetings, but nobody sat me down and said, this is what a sponsor does, and this is the role of the big book, and this is what the steps are about. I just went in there, and because I had been to some other 12-step meetings previously, I'd never identified myself as being in my first AA meeting, so nobody ever focused on me in that meeting and said, here's what you need to do. So I floundered around a long time because I had no idea about what it was that was going to keep me sober. What were your feelings like around that?
Yeah, I feel pretty lucky here. The very first meeting I went to, I got a desire chip, and Blaine came up to me and said, "Hey, look, you willing to go to any length to quit, drinking alcohol?" And I don't remember exactly what I said. I guess I said yes. I don't know. It was kind of a blur. But anyway, he gave me an assignment. He said, if you want to work the steps and you have alcoholism, I can help you, treat your alcoholism and stay sober. Do this assignment and call me. Blaine is still my sponsor. And I didn't start working the steps with him. I started with someone else. And kind of tried for a week or two, and he was he's saying I didn't go to enough meetings. I was like, well, forget this guy. I'm going to go. Blaine gave me that assignment. I'll go back to Blaine. And so, anyways, but started working with Blaine pretty quickly. He's pretty good about sticking with the book.
Taking you through the steps.
Taking me through the steps, yeah. And it was in those first few weeks of AA that I started to do what you all suggested, and maybe it would be something like praying. Right, and I wasn't particularly spiritual at that point in time. I would go to church, but I wouldn't say I had much of a spiritual connection. But I started doing what you guys said, which is, hey, read this in the morning. Okay, go to this meeting. Read this and write this out. And I started doing that stuff. And, I had some pretty strong messages telling me not to do it or telling me to kind of control it in some way. But as I took those actions, I started to, I feel like, one pretty clear memory the first few weeks is, you guys said, hey, look, read 86 to 88 and pray that in the morning. And I just remember thinking for the first time in a long time, I was driving on 610, right? Which I'm guessing not a lot of people have this on 610, but, I just had this feeling of like, man, things are good. It was just like this praying thing worked. There's hope, like I'm going to be okay. And so, that kind of gives me a little more trust in the process of following what you all say, to treat this fatal illness, because I knew it was going to kill me. And thankfully I had some good willingness.
What a wonderful experience that is, to get that sense of knowing or coming to the realization that, hey, this will work, this can work. And that sense of hope, it sounds like you had. That's amazing to be able to have that feeling. So at what point did you start to feel really at home in AA? Was that early on, or did it take a while for you to walk into the meeting and feel like, this is my home right here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, one of the first meetings I really fell in love with was probably that meeting where I met you. In fact, I think you actually put me in contact with Michael, who started me, doing the steps, and then I kind of switched after him.
Right.
But I think that was you. I'm pretty sure it was.
I think it was.
But anyway, that meeting is a large meeting. It's a men's meeting. And I was, a young working guy. I was married. And, and I felt comfortable because I found a lot of guys. It was Sunday night. It's kind of a quiet time. Nobody's rushing around, or at least a few weren't. And I found guys that were kind of my age and stage, right? In that first, year or two of sobriety. Maybe they're married, or, maybe they're, kind of professional guys, and they're trying to figure out how to do this AA thing, or how to kind of be in like business development and not drink. And I started to really connect and started to use the phone, right? I was thankful, I guess, that I had a little bit of a drive into work, and that I would use that time to and from work. I'd get kind of bored on the road, and so I would say, okay, I'm gonna call Richard from Sunday night, or I'm gonna call Jim, and I was fortunate to have a few guys, Jim H in particular, kind of showed me how to use the phone like that. I didn't realize that was beneficial, that's how you do it, is you just call up a friend and say, hey, you got 5 minutes? Hey man, how's your day going? And then you chit chat, and then you hang up, and that's it. You don't have to set up a golf, or you don't have to set up lunch. And so I started to do that, and that really helped me kind of anchor in socially. I was working the steps, I was going to meetings regularly, and so I really kind of fell in love with that Sunday night meeting. I really hated missing it. you know.
I was always glad to see you at that meeting, too. And I still, to this day, am always thankful and grateful when I see you in the meetings, because there's certain people that just kind of complete a meeting. You're one of them. And the guys you're talking about, your running buddies and your litter mates, as they call them, those are really good guys, too. And those are the kind of guys I look at and I think to myself, if he continues just to do the basics of this program, he's got a long life of sobriety ahead of him. Early on, when did you start to feel, or was there a point at which you started to feel like, hey, this thing is going to work for me long term if I continue to do the things I need to do?
Yeah, I would say, pretty quickly into that first, 3 months or so, I mean, I started to kind of feel the promises, and I started to kind of realize the problem with selfishness. And, I started to realize I can stay sober, and this is a fatal illness, and I think I've been given, a reprieve, from dying from this thing. And so it was pretty quickly there on, get in, work the steps, make a few amends. Those amends were terrifying, as was the fourth and fifth step. But, my sponsor was pretty good. He didn't, I think like most sponsors in AA, he didn't go and talk about any of the kind of confidential things that I had told him. And so I felt some pretty good trust in the process. And then I felt the relief of not having to defend these behaviors, right? These things that I did when I was in so much pain, living in this kind of untreated alcoholism, right? A boy in pain will do a lot of desperate, a lot of things that really don't line up with his values. And what I found in doing the fourth and fifth step is I was able to stop defending those behaviors and say, you know what, I really don't like that, right? And admitting it, I got some freedom from that. I wasn't expecting that.
Mm-hmm.
So doing that, and then making some amends to my parents and to siblings and my wife and things for the harms that I'd caused them in my selfish behavior. I just started to really feel connected to more and more people, and then I started developing these really amazing, close, intimate friendships with guys in AA, and it felt really great. I was like, this is kind of what I'd been missing. I needed this all along. I just,
That's a beautiful realization to come by, too, that I've arrived. I'm here. These are my people. I can count on them. They can count on me. And that sense of love and spiritual connectedness. That's why I love where the 12th step is, because it comes as the culmination of all the work prior to it, that we have that spiritual awakening. That's really cool. But so you've got 12 years in between then and now. What have been some of the high points and low points, and how did AA and your involvement in Alcoholics Anonymous help you through those times?
A lot had gone really right. Started having kids. I had 2 kids. I had a healthy girl and a healthy boy. We had a little bit of a ICU scare with my son right at the beginning, but he was okay. He got out, and my wife had preeclampsia, and so she was kind of it was a little scary, with my first child. But like those things were manageable, right? It would be scary, and then you would work through it. I would say my father started to lose his memory in, kind of 2015, 2016, 2017. So there's that going on. There's my little brother with schizophrenia, and he's being violent towards my parents in some cases. The police are taking him to jail for a week. So hard stuff started to happen in life. And then, in 2017, I got the call from my mom that my father had died, and she said, and he took his own life. And that was just, that was just a big surprise, and it just felt like I had been, kind of run over by a freight train. Just this shock. That was one of the first really hard things. That was really hard on my marriage too.
So that's 5-6 years into your sobriety at that point?
Yeah. So, this guy was kind of the rock of our family, my dad, and he was this, successful business guy. He's well-liked, and he's, kind of in the right, groups and clubs and all this stuff. And then to go do something like this, it was kind of embarrassing, It was really embarrassing. And I think it was, it put a big emotional burden, like, on my wife at the time. And it kind of just popped this bubble that I think we had.
How did you process that tragedy personally?
I think I went to a meeting as soon as I could, right? We went over and saw my mom at the house, and the police were there and all this kind of stuff. So I think I went to AA, I called the counselor, and I felt really bad about the whole thing too, because I was worried about my dad. He was still driving. He still had an office. He had kind of lost his executive job at the time, and anyway, so I kind of told him, I said, hey, Dad, I'm kind of worried about you. You're driving, and I've noticed your memory is getting worse. And I said, I really don't think you should be driving. I'm afraid you're going to, mix up red and green, and you could get hurt, maybe hurt somebody. Why can't we just get you Uber or something? And he kind of said, no, I'm fine. And, and it was about 3 weeks after that he actually committed suicide. And so I felt a lot of guilt about that. Just like if I had kept my mouth shut and not tried to play God, maybe this would have somehow played out differently. And I don't, who knows what the truth would have been and all that.
So who talked you off of that particular ledge?
I feel like I was at this club, and I talked to Daryl at the coffee bar, and just was kind of, in crisis. And, and of course I'm calling my sponsor and, talking through it with kind of my usual support group. But yeah, I basically went straight to AA and slowly just kind of, this is what one of the guys says is, let AA love you through these hard times, and, and you'll get through them. Just don't drink and keep going to meetings, and you'll be able to get through them. And I did, but it was really painful. It was really shameful. I felt like I needed my dad on so many levels still. And, and he just kind of left in this, really shocking, painful, tragic, way. So then there's the pain of abandonment, and plus all the chaos of actually having to deal with this stuff and talking to coroners and, dealing with, eulogies and emotional family members. And when people are in a lot of pain and in a lot of grief like that, a lot of times they're real nasty. And so, I was working through all that, and it was really difficult. It was really bad. And I was busy, I had a busy job, and my wife had a busy job, and we were raising 2 kids and running to daycare, and it was pretty hard, right? That was pretty painful.
It sounds tough. And the fact that you were able to get through it, the great thing about what you just said is how you mentioned AA as one of the first things that you did. Because it almost seems counterintuitive to make AA the first thing. Let me go take care of the family, take care of the details, everything else, and then I'll go back and report to 8A what I've done. I, like you, when my parents both died, I was in a meeting later that same day. An hour and a half after I closed my mother's eyes, after she breathed her last breath, I was sitting at the club just processing and saying what was going on, and the wave of love that came over, it didn't immediately heal it. It just was the beginning of that sense that I am going to be okay. Did you get that sense as you were sitting in those meetings?
I think I did. I think I was able to come down from, like what I said was kind of a crisis state, where I just, there's no peace, right? Your mind is racing. Your heart feels like it's about to explode out of your chest. You can't drink it away, right? You just have to keep, living. And AA we're fortunate. We live in a giant city, and you can find an AA meeting pretty much every hour of the day almost. And so it's convenient, and it's there, and it was, I had some kind of hard things happen in life a little, maybe your grandma dies or something like that, but it's not like your dad committing suicide. And I had kind of used AA in that way. So I feel lucky that I'd kind of had some training for when one of these bigger ones happened. And and it just, it just gives you just a little bit of peace, and you find somebody else who's been through the same thing, and they tell you they got through it and it's going to get better. And, maybe they give you somebody else to call, or they give you a suggestion, hey, call this person, or, hey, why don't you go do this? And you hear these words of wisdom that are exactly what you need to hear when you need to hear them. And for me, those are the kind of things that help me stay sober through some of these things that feel like existential at the time. And, it turns out they're not really existential, but, my brain having alcoholism, I'm sensitive, I get paralyzed by selfish fear, and I go to AA and I get some connection and I get out of myself a little bit, and it allows me to have some time to, kind of let my mind heal from some of these really hard things that are a part of life.
Yeah, and being able to go and be in a room full of people, most of whom have gone through something almost as bad, at least as bad, or much worse than what you went through, it just puts those problems into a different light. So did what happened around the time you got this happen and you got through it, did you notice that informing future things that happened to you from that point until today? And what would some of those things have been?
Yeah, their life continues to, send things my way that are not what I would choose. And higher power is in charge of all this stuff. I have had, I got divorced a couple of years ago. That was pretty crummy. COVID, that was pretty crummy. So, I've gotten through those, and it's been a similar formula, where, maybe you do some inventory, or rework the steps again and, make some amends and do some of these things. But there's also been a lot of beauty too, and I want to make sure to recognize those things for which I'm really grateful. I mean, raising kids, right? I'm raising kids with a toolbox and a set of values and a viewpoint that, my mom even said it the other day. She goes, wow, that's how that works. I just didn't even know that existed, And so I feel really grateful. I mean, for example, my son was walking to school. He had the school play that day, and he was really nervous. And he was just picking fights with his sister, and he was, saying bad words. And it was just like, I could tell, I didn't realize that what was going on with him was the play. But what we do in here is we talk about what's going on with us, and we get some relief. And I was able to kind of do that and do it in a way that he, kind of felt safe. And I think he didn't realize how nervous he was about it. But I kind of saw his body just, this just big, throughout his body, it was just kind of this big sigh when I said, are you nervous about the play, And I said to my daughter, I said, when you did the play, were you nervous? And she said, yeah. And then he kind of let out another big sigh. And there wasn't any more fighting on the rest of the walk to school. And it just made me go, oh man, I'm like, this is good stuff, right? This is maybe part of the reason why I've gone through, all this pain and chaos, is to learn how to kind of reparent myself in some of these things that at least somebody like me really needs. And then I can then share those with my kids or with other guys in the program or just with other folks, yeah.
I want to really thank you for doing this today, Doug. I didn't realize how remarkable your story was going to be when we first started talking, but it really touched me in a big way. And I just want to tell you that I'm glad you're my friend. I'm glad you're my AA brother. To see how your program has turned your life around and how 12 years in, man, you seem to be on a good course. And my hope is that for as long as I'm alive and going to meetings, that you'll be a part of my life. And I hope to be a part of your life for as long as that's going to be. I love you. I honor your sobriety and your commitment to staying sober and being of service in the program. So, again, many thanks for doing this.
Oh, thanks, Howard, man. That warms my heart up. I'm really glad you're my AA brother, and I love you too.
Thank you.
And I love that we can come in here and connect on this real level. And that maybe, it's a way for me to be of service and kind of get out of myself today and, carry the message of AA that, helped save my life and give me a life that, can just have moments of, incredible beauty in it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, my friends, that's a wrap for today's episode of AA Recovery Interviews. I want to thank my guest, Doug W., for sharing his story. And thank you for tuning in. Of course, you can listen to the deep catalog of interviews in this podcast series by following it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, and other podcast providers. Or tell Siri, Google Assistant, or Alexa, play AA Recovery Interviews podcast. Or visit our website, aarecoveryinterviews.com, where you can listen to every episode of AA Recovery Interviews. Please leave a rating or review on your podcast app. That will help others find us. And if you'd like to get in touch with me with any comments or suggestions, just email howard@aarecoveryinterviews.com. By the way, this podcast strictly adheres to AA's 12 traditions and all General Service Office guidelines for safeguarding anonymity online. I pay all production costs, and no one receives financial gain from the show. AA Recovery Interviews and my guests do not speak for or represent AA at large. This podcast is simply my way of giving back to AA, that which has been so freely given to me. The next episode of AA Recovery Interviews is on the way, so keep coming back. It'll be here soon.